Hello, welcome back to Mountain Jim Card Collectibles. So, I've been doing YouTube for a few years now. And, at least as far as hosting, channels, shows goes, I've been watching YouTube for years and years. But, there's one thing I've always puzzled about, and, that's these YouTube gurus who always manage to get, all these views, in relation to whatever subject or topic they're talking about. And I'm sure you've had to notice it as well. And what is that? Some of these YouTube gurus really don't give you very good advice. And, when I first really started getting to eBay, I was watching a lot of different eBay gurus, but really they just kept showing out the same old BS day in and day out, maybe with a little different frosting on it, maybe some sprinkles, but pretty much you just keep, getting told to basically keep going to the junk stores. I call them junk stores. They'll call them what they are: flea markets, yard sales, Goodwill, thrift markets, whatever. Keep doing it. This is how you make money on eBay. And eventually, I kept doing it. I kept taking their advice, and the stuff just kept piling up, to where, I'd have to sit and sell the stuff and take a loss just to, get a little bit of my capital back, And so much of YouTube is built on its algorithm that really hypes up these people, the YouTube algorithm decides on who stays and who goes, and the algorithm tends to like certain, like YouTube gurus. I'm just cycling down here, to, keep kind of looking at some of these guys. And these are some of the more popular, ones that are on YouTube. But the thing that I've noticed about a lot of these gurus is if you dare to make a comment that doesn't go with their way of thinking, even if it's just a question. And I ran into it on Commonwealth Flipper. I used to watch Commonwealth Flipper a lot. I made a comment, and he was really, not nice about it. And that's because it didn't go with the flow. And so I pulled my subscription, with Commonwealth Flipper. This took place over a year ago, and I don't watch the guy. I never watched the guy, but if you just type in eBay, he's always going to pull up because he's one of the YouTube favorites, of the algorithm. But my point being is, when it comes to Commonwealth Flipper, and I notice it with sports cards as well, is it's more about the community than common sense. Because let's face it, I watched him for, probably over a year. I did not legitimately learn anything from that man. Nothing. Pretty much everything that I knew going into it, I still knew when I left. It's not like, and what gets me is, this guy's a former teacher. He's a great guy. Don't get me wrong. I mean, he's a nice guy, but, I'm just saying that when it comes to reselling on eBay, it's more about community than it is about common sense, unfortunately. And what happens when you just focus on community over common sense? Well, I believe that these channels just like to verify, give you a pat on the back. You're doing a good job. Your idea is the best idea out there. Selling junk from junk shops is the best idea, the best way to make money. That I'm a YouTube guru, and it works for me. Going to Goodwill, going to thrift stores, going to flea markets. That's the way I made my money. But then they don't talk about, and this is really the issue here. It doesn't feel like them making money on eBay is how they're really making their money. I was talking to, another creator, and the sense is well, these guys aren't about making money on eBay. They're about making money because they're monetized by YouTube. And so what happens is when they get monetized by YouTube, and the YouTube algorithm will love them at this point, is day in and day out, they just come on to their show and crap anything out for their money. They don't care if they're teaching you anything or not. Why? Because, hey, they got monetized. That must mean that they know everything about everything. But I disagree with that sentiment. I really do, because where that sentiment has led me on YouTube is down the toilet, and you're going to have to do your homework and find, the correct, YouTube channel if you really want to learn about, say, reselling. Because these gurus that YouTube tends to always, shill out at you, they're just glamorized junk dealers. They really are. Or else, I'll just type in sports cards. And this just legitimizes, my statement about how YouTube tends to focus more on community than common sense. Or else, people that have a lot of wealth that can dump money into the YouTube system, say like Sports Card Investor, they'll always hype up people like that. Why? Well, YouTube's all about profit. They're more about profit than common sense. And, so some of these big YouTube gurus, that I've been watching for years, eventually you just turn off the channel because you just keep hearing wash, rinse, and repeat. And you go, bud, I'm happy that you got monetized by YouTube and you and your buddies can sit around and maybe have a chat for us every now and then, or you can come onto your channel day in and day out and just basically spew out the same stuff every day, and then it's all about, the promotions and this and that. And eventually you start to realize YouTube, the algorithm, the community, that is all it's about. It's not about common sense. It's not about teaching you how to become successful. It's about milking the system to no end and getting paid by YouTube monetization. And so, I've had to learn to get where I'm at now. Not that I'm getting wealthy or anything, but I'm definitely a step up from where I was a few years ago. And the reality is if you keep watching these gurus day in and day out, it feels like you'll reach a dead end. And you have to ask yourself, why is this guy, always, coming back and talking about, if you're just getting into the hobby, these gurus are always doing that, whether it's the eBay reselling gurus, whether it's sports card gurus. Well, you keep going, I don't want to watch stuff like that. I've been in the hobby for many, many, many years, or else I've been reselling for many, many, many years. And that's when you start to pick up on it that, the guru likely isn't very knowledgeable. It's all about the monetization on YouTube, and it's all about, those paychecks. And so I'm letting you know that if you've reached kind of a dead end on YouTube, if you're like me, like Neo, I enjoy watching Neo. I will never comment on Neo's videos. Why is that? Because every time I comment, it's like a question or this and that, and then someone else will sit there and point a finger at me and call me a troll, And that happens to me in other channels. And that is where I'm getting at is, people will watch Neo day in and day out. But does he really do a lot of homework, for his shows? And you can tell a lot of times I think he just wakes up in the morning and just, starts talking about, sports cards. But it's not like he's digging into, any brand new news that hit the market about sports cards or anything like that. And, it's great. It's a great community. It really is. But let's face it, if you start to ask questions, and this is really my point of this video, is with Neo. Once I start to ask questions, I feel like his little community wants to sit there and just, put me up, burn me at the stake for daring to question the all-knowledgeable Neo on an issue that I have a question about. And so this is where I'm saying that YouTube, the algorithm, the community over common sense really breaks down. Because once you really want to start to learn stuff, you'll start to feel that way. It's not just him that did it. I told you about, Commonwealth Picker. I had questions with Commonwealth Picker, and he just attacked me. Why is that? Because it's more about community over common sense. And eventually, if you're like me, you start to walk away from it. I only watch one eBay show a week now. Only one eBay seller. That's it. I will not watch any more, any less, for the fact that I just don't want to go down that road. This road of community, this road of know-it-allism over answering questions, this road of YouTube's algorithm, which we know it doesn't favor me. I've been cycling down sports cards here. I haven't seen one of my videos. I'm starting to understand why I'm getting so few views. But why is that? Well, because YouTube's the same way. YouTube chooses community over common sense. They're all about, invoicing, people and this and that, making the cash. But they're not about helping you. And if you're fortunate enough to find someone that's going to help you, well, I hope it doesn't fall into the community trick, like for me, it's Neil. I won't dare leave a comment or a question on Neil's videos. I still watch them all the time. But I know my place. And my place is I'm not part of the community. I'm not part of that. And so that's why, let's face it, you can watch content, and I do, there's some good content creators out here, for sports cards. I definitely watch more sports card content than eBay content. eBay content, for the most part, you got to be very, very, very careful. I just want to put that out there. It will poison your business if you follow the wrong individual, or else you'll end up like me, being a poor sap that has a bunch of junk that you can't sell because you took advice from, one of these glamorized junk dealers, And maybe they'll put up some fancy thumbnails and, maybe they're monetized, but I'm just trying to let you know it's all about them. Just like tech and sports, I blocked tech and sports and I'm happy I did. Because I watch tech and sports. First of all, he doesn't ever talk about sports. So I got lured in on that, and then he just goes into, selling a bunch of bulk junk, from flea markets, and I just like, this is a nightmare. But with tech and sports, he'll sit there and say, he's sold a bunch of this and sold a bunch of that, but it's really more about tech and sports making his monetization off YouTube, clearly, than him giving out legitimate advice. And his little cult of followers, his little community will always stick up for him, if you question his knowledge. But eventually, I think his cult is kind of learning that, he's a cult leader. He's more about the cult than using common sense and really teaching you anything about making, cash. And so to an extent, all the reselling on YouTube, all the sports card stuff tends to fall in the same boat, Are you really going to learn how to make money off YouTube? And you might get a point here, a point there, but what I found with YouTube, unfortunately, with all the gurus, is I keep saying it. It's more about community than common sense. If you start to have questions or you're questioning the guru, you will be hated on. You will be thrown out of the group. I mean, I was more or less told to get, out of, Commonwealth Pickers, thing. And I sure as hell did. I unsubscribed. I mean, I have gone out of my way to never watch his videos. And that's just the nature of it. And you begin to realize, this guy was a teacher, but yet, what is he teaching? Oh, he's teaching people, I guess, how to become YouTube gurus and get monetized over actually learning to sell stuff on eBay. Because I think it's nice how his little community will come in and purchase stuff day in and day out. And he gets to walk around his little shanty or whatever he does it in, and he picks out the junk, and things are going great, and, this and that. But are you learning anything? No. I didn't learn a damn thing. And once I started to ask questions about, moving my business up, he just lashed out at me. Now, Neo's nice, but Neo's community will lash out at you and call you trolls for the same issues, Neo Cards and Comics. So it's like very limited on what you can learn from, Neo Cards and Comics. I still watch him every day. Don't get me wrong. I just got done watching another one of his videos. But like I said, I feel like I'm not ever allowed to comment. And it's not just him. There's so many other people I watch too. And if you start to ask questions, they'll demonize you, or their little community will demonize you. And then you begin to see the breakdown in YouTube. And that is really the biggest breakdown I've seen since I've started, reselling, following more of YouTube resellers, sports card content, is I just want to pound it in. For everyone out there, if you're wondering, why things aren't working out with all the advice you've gotten from YouTube gurus, well, that's because it's about, for most channels, it's more about this, community or cult over common sense. I hope it changes. I hope YouTube would give us a better algorithm and start to show us, because there are people that are knowledgeable, that are legitimately leading people, to better lives on YouTube. And I've managed to find a few, but overall, most of your content creators are all about their community and their little cult and their idealism more than legitimately teaching you how to become like a better reseller, better at sports cards, whatever. So anyway, how do you feel about that? Leave some comments. Always like to thank my subscribers. You're the reason I keep doing these. Even though I don't get a lot of views, I still notice, I still get, the same people watching it. So I appreciate my viewers. I know I don't say it enough. And if you haven't subscribed, it's 100% free. Anyway, I hope you have a great day. And tune again for the next episode of Mountain Jim Card Collectibles. I'm out of here. Bye.